Welcome to Supercompute 24 from Atlanta, Georgia. It's the supercomputing conference. I'm here at the Dell Technologies presence with someone from Broadcom, Kim Leyenaar. Kim, tell us something about yourself, your background. What have you focused on over the last few years since you graduated from high school?
No. So I've been working for Broadcom now for 17 years. I came from the storage side of the house, so I've been a storage architect. Um, I guess a little over 20 years, but over the last couple of years, of course, there's been this shift to AI. So I've become an AI architect. So we have lots and lots of servers now available to us in the lab, and I've been analyzing all the data flows and data paths for inferencing and for training. So it's been really exciting.
So we're going to talk about that. We've titled this segment Tales from the AI Lab, specifically Broadcom. Now, Broadcom at a high level is all about, in the world of AI and pretty much everything else, the idea that being open, power efficient, and scalable is critical moving forward, whether that's networking or any other technology. That has been their mantra. And Kim, you've had a chance to get in and really dive in with both hands into this world of AI. What are you seeing? Tell us some of the cool stuff that you've been working with.
So as you probably know, and a lot of people know, so Broadcom is really integral into a lot of these servers in the data movement, all the data paths. So we make network switches, we make the NICs for the network. We have brand new ones that are coming out. We make storage controllers, we make RAID controllers, and of course we make PCIe switches. So part of what I've been doing is, it's to me, I'm trying to really understand, how are we filling these pipes? We're getting ready to go from PCIe Gen 5 to PCIe Gen 6. Do we need it? Do we need Gen 7 even quicker? And so it's been really interesting trying to analyze exactly how much of these components within the server, within these AI servers are being utilized.
So you're seeing the data move around.
Oh yeah.
Are you seeing bottlenecks now, or are you foreseeing where the next bottleneck might be?
We are. We absolutely are. We're trying to make sure that we improve on that. And some of the bottlenecks, could just be things like CPU utilization, and utilizing the NUMA architecture properly for different AI projects and such. Of course, some of it could be the networking, the collectives, the collectives overhead. I did some analysis of DLRM training and the sheer amount of collectives, and just not the bandwidth even, it's just the sheer number. And of course, from a storage world, which I come from, we call those IOPS, but they're really not. So trying to change my thinking about, about utilization and about latency and such has been really eye-opening. But
no, you said CPU, you're talking about CPU utilization. Of course, when we think AI, often we're thinking accelerators that are GPUs. But there are still CPUs working in concert with those GPUs.
Absolutely, right? The CPUs are still quite vital, and I do monitor the GPU utilization as well. And luckily, for the most part, they're very utilized when I'm running most of And I hate to call them benchmarks. I'm really just kind of exercising some of the different AI models. There's quite a bit, but we do things like we've been scaling up the number of GPUs that we're utilizing for different. Different, mostly for inferencing. So we say, what does 1 buy you? What does 2? What does 4 going to 8? And then, of course, putting them inside of the cluster. And so we're getting ready to do even more cluster analysis, because that's where it's going to get really interesting, especially from a networking standpoint. It's trying to understand,
Right.
all the data paths that are going on, and trying to make sure that, we are promoting Broadcom as the next generation for scalable architectures. From networking standpoint, and we are headed that way.
Yeah, there is no AI without networking things together, right? Essentially, very few things are going to run on a single GPU in places. Often they're going to be clusters. If someone were thinking about building out infrastructure for AI right now, what have you learned that you could pass on that might be cautionary tales or surprises, things that maybe were surprising to you in terms of performance characteristics?
Well, in our lab, we are actually getting ready to add 12 more GPU servers, so the Dell 9680 servers.
Okay.
And one of the things that we were kind of shocked at was the power requirements. And that's why power is such a big deal right now. I had somebody earlier in the show tell me that next year's show, of course, this year's show, there's been a big focus on cooling, especially liquid cooling. I mean, if you look around, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And he said next year, they're going to be talking about nuclear energy. That's going to be everywhere.
I think so. Yeah, it's crazy.
So the power requirements, and of course, we're putting liquid cooling into our labs so that we can make sure that we have these servers optimized and they're running in an optimal environment as we analyze them. So that shocked me.
Do you automatically assume that the people who can string Cat5 cable can also plumb liquid-filled things? I worry about that. There's got to be some, I mean, do we need a direct liquid cooling certification for lab people?
Probably. We have a really great, our lab engineer, lab manager, Lewis, is fantastic. And he's actually been studying all this. So he's ready for it. He is so ready for it. And we're excited. We're getting ready to have that installed just over the next
But you see
days.
liquid is, moving forward, at least now, liquid's a prerequisite. This is not, it's not a negotiable at some point.
And that kind of surprised me. I guess, my little world that I've been in for so many years, you never need a liquid to cool anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, but going forward, we're definitely going to be. So that kind of surprised me. That really was. It was shocking. The other thing that surprised me, and I'm in storage, but I was blown away by how much capacity that I need in order to do these tests. The storage that was required. So I started out, I'm like,
Why?
Oh, just the data. The data that you need to do the training is incredible. It really is. So we've been sucking all this data in, and initially I'm like, oh, just give me 2 big fat NVMe drives in there. And then I'm like, give me another big fat NVMe. And then I'm like, wait a minute, we're a storage company. Give me RAID, because there was no way if I lost this data that I was going to be happy, because it took me so long, not only to download it, to get it together, to clean that data, to organize that data. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. So, I realized we really need protected data as well. So our RAID controllers have come in quite handy. And I even did an analysis. I'm like, well, what was the difference? 1 NVMe drive versus, I put 8 of them behind a RAID controller, and it was great. I was able to, one of my data preps was taking me 5 days, 5 full days to do all the data prep. And I put in a RAID controller that went down to 2 days. So I'm like, yes.
Interesting. So some of the stuff we might think as old about as old school technology actually is relevant.
Yes.
So I know we've had conversations about where do certain storage modalities fit in the world of AI, and there have been questions about that. I want to ask you a question that gets me blank stares like I'm from Mars from AI people. I will ask them what I think is a very simple question. When you say you're going to run a model on my laptop, how much space does that model take? And they look at me like, don't you understand? It's running in memory. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But when you say, so let me ask you, when you say you're going to run this model on a laptop, is a model, can you think of it as a file at a certain level or no?
Oh yeah.
And so how big are these things?
Well, it really,
it depends.
It
depends.
I'm going to say it depends. And it really does depend. If you're going to be running it on a laptop, not my laptop, my poor laptop's old. I don't think it can handle anything right now, but they certainly can be run on laptops. But yeah, we're talking about, upwards of a terabyte for a reasonable size model.
But manageable in today's day and age. That's a thumb drive, right?
Absolutely, it really is. It really is, and you're moving all this data around, and
but that model is loaded into memory, and it's living in memory when it's running.
Yes, it is.
Okay, but so then, hold on. So, does that means that a model on an AI PC needs to be? If I have 64 gigs of memory, I think in my laptop, which is pretty good. The entire model is running in that memory in that laptop?
That's the size of the unloaded model. So it really, yeah.
Okay, the unloaded model. So not all of the model is necessarily,
correct, yeah.
Okay. But when you're talking about training, that's a whole different story because that's not, okay. Now is that training what we would call fine tuning, or is that from the ground up? You have been? Yeah,
so I've been doing some llama fine tuning, but also full training too on some of the more popular models.
Okay.
So it's been really, really interesting because we wanted to understand, what are the data paths? What are the data flows? What are the I/O sizes? What does it look like? Coming from a storage background, I am very vested in that.
Right.
And And so we've been able to take and ascertain how much data is passed through during some of these training. So how much is going through the PCIe, how much is going through the NV links, if we're, of course, if we're using NVIDIA, how much is going through the network, how much is going, through the NUMA nodes even, because that can really seriously affect, the performance of it. So it's been very interesting. Of course, looking at the memory, the CPU utilization during that, which tends to be low, but but there are definitely cases where even the memory and the CPU are critical to making sure that you are able to do the training as quickly as possible.
Final question for you. One of the interesting things about this conference is that we have this convergence of what we think of as traditional IT vendors, government agencies. We have NASA here, Department of Energy,
We do.
and academia. So you see these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed students running around, all excited about getting into their careers. Many, of course, are going to be focused on AI moving forward. But there's a whole bunch of us who have been in this world of IT for decades. It could be intimidating for some folks to think in terms of, well, I'm not sure if I'm ready for AI. You made a pretty big jump over the last couple of years, moving from knowing being one of those people who has forgotten more than 99% of people know about storage and associated things, to this new thing. What would your thoughts and advice be to people like us who have been in the IT business for a long time? Should we be afraid of AI? Should we be racing to retire? Or is it a lot of fun and interesting to get into? I mean, what do you think?
It's a lot of fun, and it's very interesting, and it's very frustrating sometimes too. Whenever you're on the bleeding edge like this, things change so quickly. What you wrote down yesterday is probably not correct today. So things change very quickly. So you just have to be willing to go with the flow. You have to be willing and able to debug. There's a lot of debugging that's been required to get, and you're like, what's this error? I've never, you try and Google it, nobody's ever heard of it. And so, being willing to stick with it, being willing to go through the code. And in fact, it was a great question, because I was on Monday, I was, in one of the classrooms here, and there was a young kid sitting next to me from UCF, which is my alum. He's getting ready to graduate in 3 semesters, and he just had a zillion questions for me. What's important? What should I look for in a company? Should I go into AI? So we had this conversation. So, and I love seeing these eager, aspiring young engineers that are coming into this market. I welcome it all.
Yeah, very exciting. Great commentary, Kim. Well, Kim, it's been great spending time
Thank
with
you
here at SC24. From the rest of us here at the 6.5 Media, 6.5 on the Road gang, I'm Dave Nicholson. Stay tuned for more content.